So welcome to the fourth in our series of webinars in this journey that we're on, not just to continue the conversation about ePortfolios, but also to hopefully work with staff in a variety of tertiary institutions around New South Wales, and I think we've got a few out of New South Wales as well, in the discussion about how we can better facilitate the embedding of them across a degree program or a program of study. So that's what really today we're trying to concentrate on. However, we're happy to divert from that anytime that we have to. So our aim today is to continue the conversation as we try to explore the planning and designing of ePortfolio tasks, and also the purposes of the ePortfolio process and product across the degree program. And one of the things that we thought about was, which Jenny and I are always thinking about, is employment and developing a sense of professional identity for students as they go through their degree program. So I suppose, you know, today we might focus a little bit on ePortfolios perhaps as a capstone, a part of a capstone unit, but we also might just talk about the processes of embedding ePortfolio across degree programs. Jenny and I probably have a couple of effective models that we can discuss with you. But there's certainly lots of models out there, and anything that we talk about today is purely from our experience. And so we're always very happy to hear what other people are doing, and also to find out how we might improve our practice as well. So it's not just us talking about how good we are all the time. It's interesting to think about how the formats actually differ. So in my case, I'm at the Conservatorium of Music Education are the students that I'm working with, so I'm training musicians to be music teachers in New South Wales high schools. So we embedded our ePortfolio process and product into our degree program about 5 years ago. So we've had a couple of cohorts that have actually graduated after having 4 years of working in an ePortfolio environment. And some of the early reports that we get from students is really about how much it helped them with their registration in the Institute of Teachers. So that was really, you know, a really positive thing for us. How we did it in the beginning is quite different to how we do it now. We've really changed as we've gone through that time. And perhaps, Jenny, you've found you've got a different format as well as you've moved along.
Well, in the faculty of, or the current faculty of education, we do have ePortfolio embedded in a postgrad degree and almost completely embedded in an undergraduate degree. And they are quite different types of ePortfolios. And so when Jennifer starts to talk about, you know, how you start thinking about embedding, there really are different purposes for ePortfolio that need to be considered.
And I think as we go along the journey, just Jenny and I in our research context, we actually see how much ours differ from each other, even though essentially, if you wanted to really melt it down, we're both training teachers. Correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
And
in the same state.
And even in that, we've written about a similar part of our ePortfolios, and that's even different, but it does achieve similar outcomes.
So some of the examples that we might give you today are really about describing what you might do as staff and what you might expect to see as the students responding to in how they manage both the process and the product of ePortfolio creation. And we might just ask ourselves a question along the way, and everybody might ask the same question, or you might have a different question today. about how the ePortfolio process and product supports any kind of improvement that you're looking for as far as those graduate capabilities. And the one that we particularly look at is the lifelong learning. And we hope that that's something that the students take away lots of stuff with them from university in their degree program, but that they actually develop a love of learning and enjoyment of learning. So people get bored because I keep saying, if learning's not enjoyable, why are we doing it? So, challenges for us as leaders of learning. I have to bring it up straight away because everybody talks about the technology.
And it's very pertinent for Wilma and Melissa because that's where they're strongly involved as well.
I don't have any magic secret answer to that. As you know, Sydney Uni has PebblePad, just as you do. And 2009, I think we got ours. So we should be really good at what we're doing. But as the technology changes, as the university implements different policies, we really have to sort of go with what we've got and try to create the best learning space for the students to really operate effectively in. So one of our partners in this research project is using moved from Mahara to WordPress, and we know that lots of other people are using a whole range of different technology platforms.
And Canberra Uni, where we were last time, they're using Mahara now.
Correct.
Yes.
Yeah, they've just moved into Mahara. So I suppose we're quite stable at Sydney because we've used Pebble for such a long time. Mm. But I won't say that every single staff member uses it because we all know that we're just a little bit.
And that is one of the issues,
flexible.
I think, and probably one of the good things about managing to embed it into a program. If you're able to embed ePortfolio into a degree program, and you can ask the students to stick to the same environment, then that's a plus. I think it's the chopping and changing that makes it really difficult.
I'd agree with that, and I've got a good example from when our students were on Classic, or what Pebble was known as Classic, and they had been asked to give some student presentations of their portfolios on a particular date, and 10 days before that date, our university transferred over to Pebble 3 or Pebble Plus. And those students were able to, even though everything was migrated for them, they had to really learn a whole new set of operations inside that technology. So that was good that we'd always been on Pebble because there was enough similarity there for them to move that. So I'm just going to leave the challenge out there of the technology for us as leaders because I'm not sure that there's a correct answer. And look, anybody that's participating in the webinar, if you've got any really wonderful gems or salient thoughts on how we move away from that barrier or that challenge of technology, then please share it with everybody because that's worth $1 million, I think. One of the really big challenges, I think, of as leaders of learning is aligning the tasks and the purpose to the discipline. And I think that's really important. We were very clear when we started with our embedding it into a degree because we were focused specifically on the graduate standards for teachers. And we started with that. It doesn't look like that anymore, the way that we operate ePortfolio within our program, but that's how we started. And it was really an easy sell to the students. Not such an easy sell to the staff. I've got to say I still, face those challenges every day of staff buy-in. I have no magic answer for that except that people look at my head and they go, oh, you're the ePortfolio person, and nod. And I nod back at them and I have another sort of, go at having a bit of a chat about the benefits and how, we can jointly go about looking at the challenges. Do you find the same, Jenny, with staff?
But it's often a difficulty because we have so many sessional staff and asking them to be trained in using something that might be part of a subject that they're teaching or might not, is quite an uphill battle at times. So that's our main problem. Staff that are continuing staff that use PebblePad in their teaching are generally ones that keep using it. But when it's new and when it's casual or sessional staff, yes, we have to continually be trying to be proactive in training them how to use it.
Well, I think I always would say, and it's lucky I wrote this on the slide, remember it is both a product process and a
Yes,
product. And
absolutely.
so if you focus on the pedagogic advantage, the pedagogic outcomes, how the pedagogy is meeting a whole range of different requirements for students in their learning, then I think that probably sometimes takes away a little bit of the fear. So I like to think of it as a learning and teaching tool. It is a technology-based operation because it's got the E in front of it. But if we take the E out of it, then portfolio building, portfolio practice in all its ways, whether it's a showcase portfolio or an evidence-based portfolio or just a learning space, learning environment portfolio, and that's not all of them. You know all of them. I know that you've got that off by heart, haven't you? All the different portfolios that you can have. It really is a tool. And if we're trying to equip our students to survive in a really, I don't know, learning and teaching operational environment where they really feel like they're part of it and they have a little bit of ownership, then I think that the process has some really good advantages. And look, as a product, it's more than a learning SPAC, as I've written on that slide. It's actually a learning space. And the more they understand what a learning space is, I think the better it is.
And I think that that has come through from some of our ed designers when they've worked with PebblePad, that they wish that they could encourage the students to just put everything in there so that the outcomes of their learning, use some of the little tools for observation or for documenting thoughts or ideas that they have in their general run-of-the-mill class time. So that sense of everything that goes in there could be useful to demonstrate their development at some stage.
Yeah, I showed my students, my fourth year students recently, because I'm working in a subject called professional and social issues for music educators. And I showed them my PebblePad, my portfolio. And they went, gosh, everything's in there. And I said, yeah, I put everything in there. And then when I need, to select and classify things for a particular operation, then, I know where it is and I can create a different web folio, or I can just take out, a component of something, or I can store a video, or I can store some audio in there. And, I find it really handy. It's like having a big electronic, manila folder, if you want to go back to those old days. And they sort of said, oh, well, don't you get confused? And I said, no, I feel like it's very organised. But I feel quite safe knowing that things are in my portfolio.
Absolutely.
And it's quite motivating because you look back at it and you go, okay, I have actually achieved, or I have collected evidence on something, or I have, really met some requirements somewhere. So I think it's a really positive thing if you do, and I would strongly advise you to have your own portfolios. Show them to your students. So here I'm sort of saying what the function could be of the portfolio as both that process and the product. So I think it's enjoyable when you do document your skills and your learning. So many students do assessment tasks or assignments and they just think that it ends. If it sits in their portfolio, they go back and they can reflect on it, and little bits of it can actually be used for other parts of their university studies or just something else that they're doing. I like the way that it actually records and tracks development.
And so I'd like to just mention something here. I mean, one of the things that we find with students is that they want everything to be perfect before they put it into their ePortfolio. But if we can make the point that things that haven't been quite so successful in the first place are much better for showing greater development later. So that's why they should be collecting lots of stuff and not only things that are perfect.
And that for my students, that gives them a really nice lens into their own students' learning that they're going to have in the future. So I think by fourth year, the way that we've embedded it into our program incrementally, so we start them in first year on something really as an orientation. They're in week 6. They've done maybe 4 or 5 set readings, and we ask them to actually write a small, very truncated, annotated bibliography on 2 of those readings, but then to actually, inside their portfolio, to reflect on what that actually means to them. Why did they choose those 2 readings? Why did we choose those readings for them to read? What has it got to do with anything that's happened in the class time, in the lectures? And how could they, or might they, or would they connect it to their future as being music teachers? Now, these kids are green, you know, they're very wet behind the ears. They've just come out of school and they've been in university for a very short period of time. And the last question I get from them always is about the technology. The first question is, oh goodness, what do you want me to write? How do I reflect? You know, why would I connect those things? And so I'm really asking them to evaluate. I'm really pushing them into a synthesis, into an evaluation, into that higher order thinking, really early on and really, you know, straight up. And so the technology and PebblePad doesn't worry them at all. That's the easy bit. The task actually, you know, is the questions that I'm getting. So I find for me in first year, first semester, that works really, really well. And the way that we've embedded it into our first education course.
So I'm going to say something here because you may have high-flying students. We have a wide variety of capabilities in our first-year students, and that's why often we come in and ask them to think about using a visual image to describe how they feel about becoming a teacher in the future or what teaching means to them, because we need to help them start to become academic thinkers. So I think that most of our first year students would fall over with a task like that.
Well, we scaffold it in the class, obviously. We don't just give it to them.
Oh no, I understand that.
You know,
but isn't that but that's kind of just goes to our earlier point that, you know, when we know our students, we can embed the ePortfolio to have different purposes at different times throughout the degree program.
Absolutely. And as you know, in second year, we actually ask them to create a visual image or a metaphor for teaching. And so we sort of have taken a very similar sort of idea, but instead of your students actually describe one, our students create one in that sense. And look, they struggle with that in their second year and they think they're all grown up by then. But actually...
Welcome, Penny.
That's all right, welcome. You know, for us, it's always focusing on how we train them to be good pedagogues themselves. So they're having, you know, a first-hand experience, I suppose, of real-world learning in the way that we sort of say all learning has to be synthesised. It can't just be in those lower ends of facts and knowledge, particularly these days with, you know, our www. I mean, the World Wide Web, it's knowledge and facts are just at their fingertips. So we sort of try and take it beyond that in that sense. So as we ask them to curate evidence all the way along, so whether it's reading, whether it's a piece of evidence of them actually teaching, our students don't go on prac until second semester, so it's quite, yeah, they've been there a year and a half before they've actually even gone out and done a practicum. But we do keep asking them to think about any little bits that they could collect as evidence along the way to show that they're developing as a music teacher. As not each course, it's been possible for us to say that the portfolio is in through every single subject that they do, but we put them in the core education subjects. As we give them, you know, the next task, we say, oh, could you go back and look and see what you did last time? So I think a really other message that I might have as a story from me is that the tasks are not isolated. So whilst the process of building the ePortfolio, they do get that that's a good learning, it's a learning and teaching tool, and that it's a really good way of operating as a pedagogue themselves. We also said, and go back and actually have a look at the tasks. So in second year, I think the end of first year, we might ask them to write their philosophy of teaching. In third year, we say, go back and read that, and they go, oh my goodness, I can't believe that's what I thought my philosophy of music teaching was. And so as we have embedded across the program, we haven't actually created a whole new task necessarily for each single time that they do it. We try to really weave it quite nicely into each other. And even though we're going back and saying, look at your philosophy, we're also saying, okay, and here's a reading that we think might go really nicely with you thinking more sagently about that philosophy of music teaching. And so we then ask them to extract components out of that reading and try and, compare and contrast their philosophy to the actual reading that we've given them, which asks them why. Explain to us, give us a really good reason. So again, we're getting them to analyse both their own thoughts and the thought of the author. Employability.
Absolutely, and we are being told about that new document, Action Now. Actually talks about portfolios, so I think ePortfolios are going to become very hot topics for higher education, particularly teacher education programs.
Yeah, Action Now's come out of BOSS Days, is that correct? Yes, and in teacher education, it's certainly a document that I've only just read in the last 3 or 4 weeks. But yeah, it's going to have a great deal of impact.
One of the interesting things that they're recommending in that, and it'd be interesting to ask people who are not in education, so there's a couple of people here and a couple of people in the webinar, but one of the things that they're suggesting in the Action Now is that when teachers come into a pre-service teaching program, that they're already registered as pre-service professionals. And so that's the start. And I wonder whether that happens already in other professional programs.
Well, that would be interesting to know. I would imagine that as each accreditation body continues to grow and gather momentum, and hopefully their connections to the people training them within their discipline grows as well. I think we'll probably find that there's more of those sorts of documents coming out. Employability, I mean, my students believe 100% that when they start at the con in first year, that they will, be in a job at the end of their 4th year. They feel very confident about that. And I quite often have to bring them back to reality and say it's got a lot to do with how you not just get through your degree program, but your approach, I suppose, to all opportunities that are available to you, not just the educational opportunities. So encouraging them to see their portfolio as part of that pathway towards getting a job, I think is an important job of ours as leaders. So we've seen this slide before if you joined us in our first webinar, because we do, I think, have to be really clear that the ePortfolio has an audience, and it's not just the student or the teacher who has a product that they want inside the portfolio that is the actual audience. I think they need to be feeling quite open to the fact that not just building the portfolio gives opportunity to select components out of it for employment, but that they should be actually using, and I think we as teachers and people that are designing tasks for portfolio, be seeing how the peer interaction can have a stronger role in that. I mean, students have well, in my experience, students have no worries about sharing quite often their assessment tasks with each other. Not always with a good end or a good outcome, but they certainly seek help, whether it's a paid tutor or whether it's a family member, where they're just trying to get a little bit of, grammar correction, or where they're actually getting ideas about how they approach different tasks. And the ePortfolio shouldn't be any different to that. They can easily ask friends, peers, family to be a part of that development or creation of their portfolio. There are specific functions, and certainly embedding it into your degree program and having actual assessment tasks aligned with your learning outcomes is one way that you can actually have a specific function for it.
Can I just say something about this with regard to the big people around the table? So, I mean, I know we want to encourage our students to believe that their portfolio is valuable to a variety of audience members. And I think your example, Jennifer, about saying that you showed it to them, that you had one as well, I think that that's really quite important. I mean, I've used PebblePad to create a web page for a research project. So I think when you can show students that it has a function, that there are some tools inside general ePortfolio platforms or tools that can be useful for a variety of purposes and a variety of audiences, they can see that they can hook into it a bit more. And I think you're right, there's been some research done, in high schools where high school children will make a webfolio about skateboarding or something, whatever their passion is, and that sharing with their peers really raises their self-esteem. So I think we can encourage students to use the ePortfolio space for more than just, answering assessment tasks.
And I know that one of the other partners in this project at UNSW, Patsy, has used portfolio processes and products extensively inside the discipline of biological sciences. Yes. Am I correct with that, I think? And, it's taken it beyond the idea of that paper and pen or that lab note recording sort of, it's actually about them understanding their profession, understanding who they are, and understanding what it is that they're doing in their degree program to make them better professionals when they actually finish. So it's about clarifying learning, it's about consolidating learning, and it's about classifying your learning. And so rarely do we actually ask our students to curate the way they learn. Everything sort of has a start and a stop all the time. And when we ask them to think deeply about why they're doing something and how they might explain what they're doing to someone else, I think it really embeds themselves into the discipline. I mean, and I think it does, and Jenny and I have written about this, develop a sense of self and how they really do feel like they're working towards a professional practice. And portfolios are not just for professional practice, but I suppose one might argue that most university degree programs are, heading towards professional practice in quite a few areas. So I've talked a little bit just briefly there about, and I think this might be your label, a digital story, but I like it. It's really nice, because learning is a story. Learning is a journey, and how you move through that is your own story. It's about documenting the aha moments, I suppose, but it's also about documenting requirements like the professional standards in our case, in teacher education. I'm sure across engineering and business and many nursing.
Yes, so Abigail has written onto our little chat room that, I'll just go back up here and say it out loud. Speech pathology students can join and are strongly encouraged to join Speech Pathology Australia. it's at a greatly reduced price and encourages students to build networks while studying. And I guess that's the point behind that key directive in that Action Now report.
Yeah, absolutely, because work readiness and employability are often put forward as institutional agendas. And I find it's really, you know, a little bit remiss of me as a leader of learning not to say that this also should be an agenda for the student. You know, they should be thinking really clearly that it's a competitive market. And yes, I've got my speech pathology degree, or I've got my accounting degree, or I've got my teaching degree. Doesn't necessarily mean that you are assured of, you know, being work ready. You know, there's quite often a lot of things that you have to do personally to ensure that there's that you're comfortable in a work ready context.
That question also reminds me of the keynote, and sorry to distract everything, but you'll remember who this is. At the ePortfolio forum last year in Melbourne, the keynote talked about that institution. Was it Deakin?
Oh, Deakin.
I'm not sure, but they gave every graduating student. We were at La Trobe, but this keynote said that they were giving every student a professional video about themselves to send out to prospective employers.
It was called Me in a Minute.
That's right. And yes, what a perfect thing to go in an ePortfolio.
Yeah, and I love it when I walk away from any conference or forum and I've actually learned something that I already knew but I wasn't using.
Yes. And
my 4th years in this capstone unit in semester 2 have actually created the Me in a Minute. It's based on the elevator pitch from Harvard Business School, but they scripted them, they recorded them. It was lovely. Quite a few of them said they were in their you know, tie and jacket with shorts underneath because they were only recording from here up. Yeah, and some of them have actually used them for employment applications at the moment. So yeah, it really, they said it was one of the most difficult things they've ever done, that in 60 seconds they talked about 4 years, not only training to be a teacher, but their 4 years as a performer and a creative artist or a composer, or you know, whatever their principal study was, and just making that pitch was really hard. But I've got to say, they did them really well. I didn't make it compulsory, and I was quite pleased to see that probably 2/3 of the cohort did take it up because they could see how important it was. But yeah, the portfolio certainly helped them write their digital story in that context. And it was Deakin. And if you want to go onto the Deakin website, they actually have quite a few examples of the Me in a Minute from a range of different disciplines. So that was certainly a good thing to do. I'm at repeating slides, aren't I? That's terrible. But this is the second one that I'm going to show you because it's a really nice graphic, and it's one of my pet discussion points with staff quite often is curriculum mapping. And we all agree with each other when we talk about it, which is lovely. Nobody's ever sitting there going, you know, you should never do that. That's terrible. But, you know, if you don't align your learning outcomes with your actual products or assessment tasks, then it's very, very hard for you to see how you're meeting the particular accreditation standards as well. And so when we started Pebble Pads and portfolios embedded into our degree program, we actually looked at our degree program, which we look at every 5 years because accreditation for our degree program comes every 5 years. And it's lovely to actually sit around a table and to realise what works and what doesn't work inside a curriculum, training teachers. But this is where we really saw where the portfolio processes and products really fitted in. It's very tiny. I'm so sorry that it's tiny like that, and I think I promised you I was going to select 1 year out to really look at. But as we look at each unit of study, and you can...
Yes, you can make it full screen.
You can
I highly recommend that.
And make it a little bit bigger. You can see that we have a range of different tasks through each of them. And because Pebble has Pebble language, so Webfolio probably isn't found in Mahara or WordPress, I wouldn't think.
They probably call it ePortfolio.
They might, but it's the idea that you're actually making mini little folios inside your portfolio. Would you agree with that?
The term Webfolio?
Yes, the way that it's been used. So, you know, for example, they're in, we aptly name that PMS, Popular Music Studies. We asked them to find a piece of pop music and plan how to teach it. So really challenging for students that are at a conservatory of old music and are really classically trained and working in a Western art environment, art music environment. So it might look like a really simple task, but there's quite a lot of scaffolding that actually has to go into that. And the reason we do that is because when they teach year 11 and 12 Music 1, they have to teach music for the last 25 years. So, you know, we're being quite specific about ensuring that we're meeting those graduate standards. They know their discipline, they know their syllabus, by creating some of these tasks. They actually really like putting this into their portfolio because they like the challenge of trying to edit down the music or finding a refrain in there or finding a video clip, or linking it to YouTube somehow and using it as a teaching resource.
And that's a very good point, isn't it? That's one of the main obstacles or considerations with ePortfolios is the storing of the size of files. So, I mean, Pebble has recommended up until the latest version, I think, that students store their photographs or their videos elsewhere and link to them.
Yeah.
But I think now they're increasing the size of the files that can be stored inside a student's personal space.
I think that it's quite good practice in a virtual environment to not have everything just stored in one place. I think it's good to access different storage areas. We're Dropbox fanatics, aren't we? That's how we sort of share our most of our material between us, just because of our geographic difference. But yeah, certainly YouTube is widely used by our students because they're in that visual and audio environment, so they use that. Now, I suppose, within a range of, so we can just see even there in composition, we just ask them to upload a composition. Now, the reason we're doing that in third year is that in first year we've asked them to actually put one in, and usually by third year they're in some kind of, shock, horror, that they even composed something like that and committed it to a portfolio in first year. So they want to take that down straight away and replace it with one. And we always say, no, leave them there to make sure you can see your journey. What's your development? How have you changed? Reflect on that. See how that's actually brought you forward as a composer.
The good thing about this slide, Jennifer, is that even though this is a curriculum map of your course, the key shows all of the people who are participating the sorts of things that you're having to think about within an embedded program. And so that's really good, that providing evidence and documentation, for future employment, but also that there's a mixture of things, there's a mixture of types of tasks for them to do.
And look, I think that probably the tasks, which I always think is great practice, I might be wrong, but I change my assessment tasks pretty much every year because I think that's about us moving forward and us, looking at the material that we're teaching and being really research engaged in that. I'd hate to think that, the tasks that I looked at, which may have related to, a piece of theory, but no one's written anything new on that theory in 12 or 24 months seems to be unlikely. So I think if you're working in a research engaged or a research enriched learning and teaching environment, that you need to always look at changing your assessment tasks. And so these might be just outlines of them. The actual task might look a little bit different that we give them in that time. I think it's really beneficial to my students that we have a capstone unit where the portfolio is really a key component of it. And that sort of is a married unit of study with professional experience. They do an internship of pretty much the whole of term 3, 4 days a week, and then they come to uni 1 day a week. And we ensure that they've actually completed a webfolio, what we might call a work-ready webfolio. So they've got their resume in there that's been scrutinised, assisted by the Careers Centre as we actually do that. They've done a mock interview and they've had a panel of experts, so people that have actually been interviewers and people that have worked for a long time and what they see as the key elements. So we're really, in that capstone unit, really focused on employment and work readiness. We've got together a team from around the university to really help us with that. So they create, and they've now added me in a minute this year. They've really created a webfolio inside their ePortfolio to be ready to just have a job application out there, because they'll all start coming up at about September, October. Anything you want to add to curriculum mapping and
or any questions from anyone?
So we're getting close to the end. We've probably only got about 10-15 minutes left. For us, for me, at Sydney, embedding across the degree program has really helped myself and my staff, and we have quite a few casuals as well that work with us, in seeing how we're facilitating their learning, how we're part of that facilitation. It's not a new concept at all, but we're not instructing them. The ePortfolio has really given them a lot of ownership over their learning. And I think quite a few of them, do a really, really amazing job with their portfolios. Their Pebble Pad for me are exemplars. Others, they manage the tasks like anyone would manage a task. Just because it's in a different environment doesn't mean they actually take any more time with it or anything like that. But I think it has really contributed for my students in being able to move, from that surface learning into deep learning. I think they understand themselves better, and I think they understand their role as a facilitator of learning better, because we're modelling that to them.
I probably could give a little plug for Pebble here, in
Sure.
that I think just that some of the smaller tools that we encourage students to use do scaffold them very clearly through a thinking process that is quite positive. So, an action plan, or, a structured thought, or a reflective thought. Ask them really good questions to put their ideas into, so that, that is our job, and we do give them good things to reflect on. But if they're not listening or not with you all the time, I think that the Pebble thoughts are really useful for some of our students, and to also see them thinking of different uses for them.
I agree with that, and I'll give my little plug for Pebble as well. The mobile app that they've got, Pebble Pocket, which collects...
we can't use that yet, but we will.
Oh, okay.
Soon we'll be using it.
Yeah, but just collects really a thought, piece of audio or a photo, or a small reflection or an activity that they might have done while they're mobile, while they're actually, let's say in the real world, sitting in the library, and they read something and they just want to quickly, record that before they're really trying to change task into working on their portfolio in Pebble. So it's about really a little...
Yes, accessing it any time.
Any time, yeah. Our students are really using Pebble Pocket in their practicums.
Good.
Yeah,
I would like to see that happen more.
Yeah, they're really using it there.
And that's teacher education, but you can imagine that, you know, people who are walking around a building site could take a quick photograph of something, or, you know, if you're in a hospital.
I was just going to say that because I use portfolios with our professional practice internship, and we have our students in arts industry places. So some of them are actually sitting in an orchestra pit, and they're using their Pebble Pocket just for an experience that they see with a technique that a musician's using, and they go, oh, I really want to think about that. I want to use that with my teacher when I go back to the con. Others are actually designing, you know, web pages or researching. So within ABC Classic FM, for example, they might be doing programming. So they're using it. It's, you know, it's not within teacher education at all. It's actually inside their arts industry, their own music industry that they're working in. So I have,
Yes.
How do you go with confidentiality?
Well,
in Pebble Pocket, just expand on that. Yeah, well, yeah. And we're hoping that, you know, everybody that talks to the students throughout their whole degree program is talking to them about those sorts of issues.
Academic integrity.
But also talking about child protection. So my students, I'll say, oh, I want to, I've done this amazing composition, I'm going to teach it to year 3, you know, and I'm actually going to, you know, video that. And I say, that's fine as long as the students' heads are not facing the camera. You know, you've got to have the back of their heads. And other times I'll say to them, check with the school where they've got photographic permissions, in with the deputy, you know, and then you can actually have them in there. But I say to them, I don't want to look at your students and how they're reacting. I want to look at you. How are you actually managing that? So I'm thinking with confidentiality, quite often that's covered in early stages of their degree or their training. I could be wrong, but hopefully they're understanding that. Pebble, and I think this is right with Pebble Pocket as well, it's actually private unless you share it with someone.
And also you have to tick a little box that says you have the right to upload this. So it has to be your photograph and you kind of really need to have permission.
So I think I haven't had a problem with it so far, but I'm not saying that it wouldn't exist. So I think in your ePortfolio products, if you're actually looking at how you embed it into your degree program, the process, I think the learning and teaching tool, maybe we've banged on a bit too much about that one, but hopefully people are getting that. I think it's important to make sure that the products are robust. You know, if you're going to ask them to collect some evidence, it's not, you know, just to have a photo in there or just have a piece of audio in there or just have a thought in there. You know, sometimes I'll comment on students, I'll say, well, thanks very much, but finding out that you caught the bus at 8:10 really, you know, isn't giving me evidence of you learning anything today. You know, I need to know more of, you know, why they're actually selecting that piece of evidence and why they're telling me about that. So I think it's really important that they look at their artefacts, assets they're called inside Pebble, and really clearly think about why they're putting them there.
Yes, I was just thinking about perhaps my little soapbox issue is the templates they choose, you know, and that they have a purpose as well, that they don't kind of make use the cartoony template or something like that, but the template actually says something about themselves or the work they're submitting.
Yeah, I think like anything, you know, you can read 2,000 words of something, or you can read something 2,000 words or nothing. Yeah, still means you've written 2,000 words. So the sense of self.
The sense of self? Well, we believe we're enhancing the sense of self, don't we?
We do.
Some of the tasks that that are different in each of our degree programs, but we believe are actually helping the students create a sense of self, of their own self as a professional, teacher. And Jennifer explained before that for you that happens in your second year. In our graduate degree, the Master of Education, we ask them to find an image that suits them when they begin the degree program, and then we ask them again at the end. And that discussion, being able to talk about themselves through the metaphors that they've chosen, means that they explain more deeply about themselves as professional teachers rather than trying to find the words. The images actually help them do the discussion.
And sometimes I connect the dots for them. It's not all, self-service. And I do say, the reason we're doing this, or the purpose of this, or what you will get out of this. And, I'm being quite positive. I'm not sort of saying you might get this out. I'm sort of saying what you will get out of this is actually, real world experiences. You'll actually need to find a quality of work life, which is my QWL there, which I probably should have written out in full, as you progress through this profession. And your degree program is the beginning of that,
Absolutely.
If you can motivate yourself for the 24 weeks for 4 years and pass and actually get something out of it and feel like you've been motivated towards what you're studying in and for, then I think that is a quality of work life. And I'm not just saying they all have to go out and get a job. I'm just saying that they need to think about that.
No, but that is back to that that directive of the Action Now, isn't it? If they come into a professional degree, help them to think that they're already part of that profession. And I think that that's what we're talking about with the sense of self and the real world and lifelong learning.
Yeah,
really.
I think that's important. So I've put a couple of video links in there into the PowerPoint for you to have a look at. Blade sharing his view of working in Pebble Plus, working in his ePortfolio. Blade's graduated at the end of last year, and he's been in fairly well full-time employment this year, which is pretty good. Casual blocks and things like that, but in some really good departmental schools around Sydney. And then I've just put one of our webfolios in there where our student Danica actually talks about parallel experiences, leadership, and being a part of an orchestra, and how that actually impacts on her understanding of, being a music teacher, being a professional, being part of that work readiness and that world that she's in. And I just gave one question that might be something you might want to take back to your discipline. Is there actually evidence in the portfolios that you're designing or working with at the moment that could be shown or shared with others? Because, that's how we are going to continue this debate or discussion or conversation, whatever you want to call it, about portfolios and how they contribute to learning. So I would encourage you to take that question away with you. And be confident in the fact that we lead. We do lead. Do they learn? Well, that's, the next question for you. But I think that we do lead, and we have to be strong leaders in the way that we go about introducing, continuing, developing, expanding the work that we're doing with portfolios. So these settings of personal targets, identifying the skills through any reflective tasks that they might work on through, for example, accreditation, how they actually see, how we see ourselves as leaders and how they see themselves as the next leader in the profession, depending on what discipline you're actually working on. But be confident, you are giving them rich, individualised academic advice, I've called it there. I might be feeling too grand, but I think that it's really important that we feel confident about that. Do you want to add anything to that?
No, I think that often students tell us that ePortfolio tasks are a lot of work. But I think I agree with that last comment. They also make them think more deeply about what they're going to say in them and how they represent themselves. So I think we should be encouraging them to take up that difficulty.
Yeah, and as you go beyond this webinar and into maybe discussion around your school or the faculty, your discipline, your whole university, I don't know how it works. You know, I've just thought about, you know, our philosophy of teaching. What kinds of experiences do we encourage our students to have? If we use a portfolio, how do we use it effectively in our degree program? You know, ours is in Sydney, and I'm not talking out of turn here. You know, it's scattered across the university. It's used quite differently, and it's used really well in one very small area of health sciences, and then maybe not in some of the others at all. But that seems to be, you know, an experience of portfolios across an institution. You know, it's used in different ways by different people. But look for the commonalities across the disciplines. You know, how can we actually encourage and support each other in this? I've included my jigsaw puzzle from our website. The project, this is an OLT funded project, and it has a website, ePortfolioassist.com.au. And I love this little jigsaw puzzle because it actually talks about us thinking of our philosophies, our pedagogy, our curriculum, our commitment, you know, how we resource and support, and what the tools for learning are. Now, this is quite a small slide, but if you go into the website, you'll actually see that it's a little larger.
Say what it is again, Jennifer, and I'll put it in the chat box. So it's ePortfolio Assist, isn't it?
It's just on the last slide.
Oh, okay. I don't
yeah, but you can put it in the chat box if you want.
Okay, no
That's
problem.
okay. So, look, I've pretty much finished exactly an hour after we started, which was good. Thank you to my lovely Dr. John Taylor from Sydney, that is always assisting and managing the webinar from afar for me, but also to CSU Wagga campus for hosting us today, and to all the participants that were with us. That was really lovely. And please keep looking at our website. It'll continue to be developed and added to even when the project ends at the end of this year. If you'd like a recording of this because some colleagues missed it, then I'll just email me, and in a couple of weeks there'll be a link to the recording.
Also, thank you, guest, for saying thank you. But I guess also I'm quite happy if anyone wants to ask me any questions about the work we've been doing here at CSU. I'm sure Jennifer would be happy to answer any questions about the Sydney Uni embedded ePortfolio. Our colleague Patsy in the next to last webinar talked about the embedded ePortfolio at her university. So between us, we do have we've got a couple of examples that are working reasonably well.
Yeah.
So we'd be very happy to answer questions, provide advice, and I'm hoping that here at CSU we might be able to get a few people together who are interested in supporting each other in that. It's quite a lot of work has to go into the embedding. So I think if we're willing to support each other, then it's maybe not quite so difficult.
Yeah, and I think if you're interested in the 3 previous webinars, they're actually recordings on that project website if you want to listen to any of those, and that's got some slides there with some other examples as well.
And we did try to build up to that, didn't we? We started off with a very general introduction to ePortfolio, and then went from small embedding in a subject right up to here where we've been talking about how to think about putting it into an entire program.
And I'm just putting Jenny on the spot here, but I think we're having a 5th webinar on the Albury campus, maybe in November.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
There we go.
So asking for requests then about what the topic might be, where we could be most helpful.
Good. Well, thank you very much, and I'm going to sign off now.